Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching the Today I Found Out YouTube channel, and in the video today we're looking at why a typical workday is 8 hours long. During the Industrial Revolution, companies attempted to maximize the output of their factories by keeping them running as many hours as possible, typically implementing a sun-up to sundown workday. Wages were also extremely low, so workers themselves often needed to work these long shifts just to get by, including often sending their children to work in the factories as well, rather than getting them educated. With little representation, education, or options, factory workers also tended to work in horrible working conditions to go along with the bad hours. The typical working day at this time lasted anywhere from 10 to 18 hours per day, 6 days a week. This all began to change in the 19th century. The first to suggest an 8-hour workday for everyone was a British man by the name of Robert Owen, who was also one of the founders of socialism. Owen felt that the workday should be divided into thirds, with workers getting equal time to themselves and to sleep as they did for work. Thus, in 1817, he began campaigning for 8-hour working days for all workers, coming up with the phrase 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest. Unfortunately, this did not catch on for some time, though throughout the 19th century, a series of Factories Acts were passed that steadily improved working conditions and reduced work hours for factory workers. For instance, the Factories Act of 1847 stipulated that women and children were to be granted a 10-hour workday, thus only having to work 60 hours a week. The 8-hour workday cause was taken up once again in Britain in 1884 by Tom Mann, who was part of the Social Democratic Federation. Mann subsequently formed an 8-hour league whose sole goal was to get the 8-hour workday established. Their biggest victory came when they managed to convince the Trades Union Congress, which represented the majority of unions in Britain, and does so even to this day, to establish the 8-hour workday as one of their primary goals, which they subsequently began to work towards. The push for a shorter workday began earlier in the United States in 1791, with workers in Philadelphia striking for a 10-hour total workday that would include 2 hours for meals. By the 1830s, support for 8-hour workdays was shared among the majority of working-class people in the United States, but still failed to find support among business owners. Over the next few decades, workers continued to hold strikes demanding shorter working hours, and gradually things began improving. Momentum for the cause particularly picked up with several 8-hour leagues forming in the United States, as Mann had formed in Britain around this same time. In 1884, the Federation of Organized Trades and Labor Unions declared that May 1, 1886 would be the first day that an 8-hour workday would be made mandatory. This, of course, was neither backed by any federal mandate nor the businesses themselves, and relied on workers striking and raising a general ruckus to drive the point home. When May 1, 1886 arrived, the first ever May Day parade was held, with 350,000 workers walking off their jobs protesting for the 8-hour workday. Progress was still slow, and it wasn't until 1905 that industries began implementing the 8-hour workday on their own accord. One of the first businesses to implement this was the Ford Motor Company in 1914, which not only cut the standard workday to 8 hours, but also doubled their workers' pay in the process. To the shock of many industries, this resulted in Ford's productivity off of those same workers, but with fewer hours, actually increasing significantly, and Ford's profit margins doubled within 2 years after implementing this change. This encouraged other companies to adopt the shorter 8-hour workday as a standard for their employees. Finally, in 1937, the 8-hour workday was standardized in the United States and regulated by the federal government according to the Fair Labor Standards Act. It stipulated that workers were not to work more than 44 hours per week, and any hours over 40 required of the worker were to be paid with overtime bonuses added to their normal pay rate. So I really hope you found that video interesting, and if you did, please give us a like below, it really helps out. And don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos like this most days of the week. Also, over there on the right, a couple of other videos you'll probably enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.